For decades, the story of Israelis. The story of Palestinians has been one of deep-seated conflict marked by cycles of violence, occupation, and a seemingly endless quest for security and statehood. At the heart of this struggle lies the Gaza Strip, a small but densely populated coastal territory that has become a focal point of regional and international concern. The conflict is complex, with historical grievances, land disputes, and religious claims interwoven into a tapestry of modern political strife. For Israel, the primary concern has always been security, a need to protect its citizens from attacks and to maintain its existence in a historically volatile neighborhood. For Palestinians, the narrative is one of displacement, occupation, and the aspiration for self-determination and a sovereign state of their own. Within this landscape, the militant group Hamas emerged as a dominant force in Palestinian politics, particularly after winning legislative elections in 2006 and seizing control of the Gaza Strip in 2007. Designated as a terrorist organization by Israel, the United States, and the European Union, Hamas has been locked in a protracted and often violent struggle with Israel. In the complex and often deadlocked theater of Middle Eastern diplomacy, the small Gulf nation of Qatar has carved out a unique and indispensable role for itself as a key mediator. Leveraging its immense wealth from natural gas, Qatar has pursued a foreign policy that allows it to maintain open channels of communication with a wide array of actors, including those who are adversaries to one another. This includes maintaining strong ties with Western powers like the United States, which has a major military base on its soil, while also providing a political base for the leadership of Hamas. This delicate balancing act has positioned Doha as a crucial go-between in conflicts where direct communication has broken down, most notably between Israel and Hamas. Qatar's role as a mediator is not just a matter of convenience, it is a strategic choice that has become central to its international identity. By hosting Hamas's political office, Qatar has been able to facilitate indirect negotiations that would otherwise be impossible. This has made Doha the primary venue for discussions concerning ceasefire agreements, hostage releases, humanitarian aid for Gaza. Qatari diplomats have spent countless hours shuttling between parties, conveying messages and attempting to bridge the vast divides that separate them. Their efforts have been instrumental in brokering temporary truces that have provided brief respites from violence and allowed for the exchange of captives, offering glimmers of hope amidst the despair. On Tuesday, September 10, 2025, the fragile world of diplomacy was shattered by a sudden and unprecedented act of violence. Israel carried out a targeted military strike in Doha, the capital of Qatar. This was not just another operation, it was a brazen attack inside the borders of a sovereign nation that had been acting as the central mediator in the very peace talks the strike imperiled. The target, according to Israeli officials, was the senior leadership of Hamas, the members of the negotiating team residing in the city, actively engaged in discussions for a new ceasefire agreement. The strike marked a dramatic escalation, a radical departure from previous Israeli tactics. Diplomatic tensions were already at a peak. A new ceasefire proposal heavily promoted by the United States was on the table. The Hamas delegation in Doha was reportedly meeting to consider its terms. The timing was seen by many as a calculated message. It occurred when a potential breakthrough seemed possible, raising immediate questions about Israel's commitment to negotiations. The decision to strike within Qatar was a high-risk gamble. It threatened to alienate key partners and unravel Doha's diplomatic framework. Initial reports say the operation was precise, aimed at a specific location where Hamas leaders were gathered. News broke quickly it was a political earthquake. In the chaotic hours following the strike, details began to emerge about who was targeted and the extent of the casualties. The primary focus of the Israeli operation was Hamas's chief negotiator, Khalil al-Hayya. He'd been a central player in recent ceasefire negotiations. He'd also been central to hostage negotiations. That made him one of the most visible faces of Hamas's diplomatic efforts. A senior Israeli official confirmed to CNN that he was among those targeted in the attack. The intent was clear: to decapitate the Hamas negotiating team at a critical juncture in the talks. The aim was to send a powerful, ruthless message about Israel's reach and willingness to eliminate its enemies. However, the outcome of the strike was not as decisive as Israel might have hoped. Hamas quickly issued a statement confirming the attack, but it asserted that the strike had failed in its primary objective. While the strike did result in casualties, the group claimed its top negotiators had survived. According to Hamas, the attack killed 5 of its members. but it did not succeed in assassinating the core members of the negotiating delegation. The strike was a partial success. It showed the capability to strike deep within enemy territory. Yet it failed to remove key figures, leaving the negotiating leadership wounded but largely intact. The Qatari government found itself at the center of this international crisis. Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al Thani. As hosts of the peace talks and protectors of the Hamas political office, they were forced to respond to a military attack on their soil. Sheikh Mohammed, who had been personally mediating the talks, was thrust into condemning an act of aggression. At the same time, he had to try to salvage the diplomatic process that had been so violently disrupted. His statements would be crucial in setting the tone for the regional and global response. The reaction from Qatar was swift, it was unequivocal, and honestly, furious. The attack was not just a violation of diplomatic norms, it was a direct assault on the nation's sovereignty. In a powerful statement, Qatar's emir condemned the strike. He called it a flagrant violation of Qatar's sovereignty and security, and a clear breach of the rules and principles of international law. Prime Minister Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed labeled the attack state terrorism. The Qatar Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a formal statement. It decried the strike as a blatant violation of international law, declaring Qatar would not tolerate this reckless behavior, nor the continuous tampering with the security of the region. The Israeli strike in Doha did not just provoke outrage in Qatar, it triggered a wave of widespread global condemnation. The United States was placed in an exceedingly difficult position. U.S. President Donald Trump, who had been championing the latest ceasefire proposal, expressed his deep displeasure with the Israeli action. He told reporters he was not happy about how the attack transpired. "I was very unhappy about every aspect." His administration was caught between steadfast support for Israeli security and its partnership with Qatar, a crucial regional ally. A spokesperson for the administration elaborated on the frustration. Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States, that is working very hard to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals, the spokesperson said. The United Nations also joined the chorus of condemnation. Secretary-General Antonio Guterres described the strikes as a flagrant violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar. He emphasized the crucial and positive role Qatar had been playing in trying to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza. Guterres' statement was a plea for a return to diplomacy over conflict. All parties must work towards achieving a permanent ceasefire, not destroying it. His words reflected a broader international consensus that the attack was not only illegal, but profoundly counterproductive to peace. The overwhelming international condemnation suggested that for most of the world, the answer was a resounding no. The immediate and most damaging consequence of the Israeli strike in Doha was the severe blow to ceasefire negotiations. At the very moment of the attack, the Hamas negotiating team was reportedly in a meeting. They were discussing the latest proposal put forth by the United States. That proposal was seen as a serious, albeit difficult, path toward ending the hostilities. It also aimed at securing the release of hostages. The strike blew up the negotiating table, replacing cautious optimism with anger. It then produced deep mistrust and open recrimination. It was hard to imagine talks continuing after an attempted assassination of designated negotiators. Hamas was quick to declare the attack proved Israel's lack of interest in a peaceful resolution. The targeting of the negotiating delegation confirms without a doubt that Netanyahu and his government do not want to reach any agreement. From Hamas's view, the strike was deliberate sabotage. It was meant to derail the peace process and provide cover for continued military action. That interpretation hardened their position, making concessions nearly impossible. The already paper-thin trust appeared completely shattered. In response to the attack on its soil, Qatar initially announced a temporary suspension of its mediation efforts. The move signaled it could not host talks under the threat of strikes. The suspension sent a shockwave through the international community. Qatar had been the central pillar of the diplomatic process. Without Doha's facilitation, the channel between Israel and Hamas would effectively close. Despite the suspension and pressure, Qatar soon made a crucial decision. Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani announced Qatar would continue its mediation efforts. "Nothing will deter us from continuing this mediation in the region," he said. Still, the damage was done. the negotiating environment grew far more toxic and challenging. The Israeli attack in Doha ignited a fierce debate that extended far beyond the immediate conflict: international law, national sovereignty, the ethics of warfare. The most significant point of controversy was Israel's decision to conduct a military operation inside the territory of a sovereign nation, Qatar, without its consent. International law is built upon the foundational principle that states are sovereign and their borders are inviolable. Unilaterally carrying out a strike, particularly in the capital city of a nation that is not a direct party to the conflict, is widely considered a grave breach of these established norms. Qatar's leaders immediately framed it as such, calling it a flagrant violation of their country's sovereignty and security. From Israel's perspective, the strategic calculation likely revolved around the idea that Hamas leaders, regardless of their location, remain legitimate military targets. Israeli security doctrine has long held that those who plan and direct attacks against its citizens are combatants, no matter where they reside. In this view, the Hamas political office in Doha is not a diplomatic mission, but a command and control center for a terrorist organization. Therefore, the strike was justified as an act of self-defense, aimed at eliminating a threat to national security. However, this justification clashes directly with the diplomatic immunity and protection typically afforded to negotiators engaged in peace talks, creating a profound legal and ethical conflict. This controversy highlights a fundamental disagreement in how different sides view the situation. It raised an uncomfortable question: can the rules of sovereignty be set aside in the name of fighting terrorism? The Israeli strike on Hamas leaders in Doha on September 10, 2025, stands as a watershed moment that has profoundly reshaped the landscape of the Middle East peace process. This event matters not just because of the immediate violence or the diplomatic fallout, but because it exposed deep, perhaps irreconcilable fissures. The attack showed some Israeli leaders willing to prioritize military action over delicate diplomacy, risking alienating crucial allies and shattering negotiation frameworks. It revealed a chasm of mistrust deep enough that one side felt justified targeting negotiators mid-dialogue. Looking ahead, the path to peace appears more precarious than ever. Qatar has committed to continue mediating, but the atmosphere is frankly poisoned. Rebuilding genuine trust seems nearly impossible once the sanctity of the negotiating venue has been violated. Hamas, feeling betrayed and targeted, may harden its position, making concessions on hostage releases and disarmament politically impossible. Israel faces a choice: double down militarily or respond to international condemnation and recommit to diplomacy, a difficult political move at home. The international community, especially the United States, faces a major challenge. Ultimately, peace may hinge on whether leaders can pull back from the brink. What happens next, whether moderation and diplomacy prevail over the drums of war, will decide the fate of millions and the stability of the Middle East for years to come.